Today we're going to be talking about 5 big mistakes that people make with ball comp. The first thing I would say normally make a mistake on is essentially understanding that you're playing for your Zenyatta. So let's first go into that. So why do you play for your Zenyatta? Why is Zenyatta essentially your carry? Well, if you think about this first of all logically, right? Zenyatta is first of all how you position, right? You're essentially able to be in a place where the enemy team isn't able to actually get on you based off how your team plays. And what I mean by this is if your Zen is playing right over here, your Brig is also helping, your D.Va is helping, and then maybe your Ball Tracer is playing over here, the enemy team is actually going to struggle to get on your Zen. And because of this, your Zen essentially is able to constantly dish out damage while also giving resources to maybe your Brig or your DPS who might be playing in any of these spots. Let's say your Tracers, or let's say your Sombra's playing over here. Let's say your Ball plus Tracer's playing there. So now your Zen is essentially able to give resources to your flankers and constantly dish out damage. So that's really, really, really strong. As well as enemy team can't necessarily go on your Zen, and if they do, they might die. Or if they try to with Ball Tracer soft engages. But the next thing that makes Zen so strong is the fact that when you play Zen and you probably understand how to play the hero, which we'll talk about later, then you can understand that you can look to rotate mid-fight to get harder and more aggressive angles. Or maybe you might even look to like force and go for a hard brawl. As well as, honestly, Rally and Trance are just really strong ultimates that you can get a lot of value out of. The next thing I wanted to talk about essentially is important ultimates in this composition in ball comp, as well as positive ult trades. So before I go forward, what are positive ult trades? So positive ult trades are essentially like, first of all, an ult trade, right, is when, like, let's say the enemy team shatters you, you use beat, you trade ultimates. Very simple. But a positive ult trade is something that's more beneficial to you. So for instance, maybe you use the enemy team uses Nanoblade and you maybe throw you flux it, right? They use 2 ultimates, you use 1. That's a pretty good trade. Or another really good one that I'll mention in a minute is, let's say the enemy you use mines on their backline and you force Rally or Trance. That's a pretty good ult trade as well. So if you sort of just look at this, Ball D.Va, oh, whoops, there we go, my mouse. Ball D.Va, Tracer, Sombra, Brig, Zen, and then sometimes you have Sigma, sometimes you have Echo, you have Ashe, or Cass. So logically, if you look at this, the important ultimates here are EMP, Rally, and Trance. So if you're essentially able, if those are the important ultimates, then, and let's say the enemy team has, let's say, Rally, Trance, or even EMP, and let's say you, for a positive ult trade, use Mines to force out Rally by slamming the Brig, or maybe you Flux and you force out Trance, or maybe you Pulse and you force out Rally, or you kill the Brig when the Brig's rallying. That's a really good positive ult trade, and that can give your team a very, very big advantage. Because let's say you start the fight with, both teams start with Rally, Trance, and then your team uses Mines to hit their backline, it forces their Rally, then inherently you have a support ult advantage, and that can really help you win. The next thing I want to talk about is different playstyles. So there's a lot of different playstyles, and I think one of the ones I want to highlight essentially is forcing point. Because I think a lot of people don't fully understand the value of forcing point and how you can essentially bait the enemy team into your Zenyatta. And again, as we talked about earlier, Zenyatta is sort of your carry. So if you can bait the enemy team into your Zenyatta's LOS, your Zenyatta will get a lot of value. So if the enemy team is playing a double shield, which I think is one of the comps I think a lot of people struggle with ball comp, you don't really want to try and outspam them because they have a corner, they have 2 shields, you're not going to win that. You essentially want to bait them into a rotation or bait them to an unfavorable position, aka open space, and then look to punish them. So for instance here, let's say the cart's right over here. What you'll look to do is you can put your Brig over here, your Zen, your D.Va can sort of hold over here. Normally you probably won't actually run a D.Va into double shield, you'll probably maybe run a Sigma. And then your Ball will look to maybe come behind and try and displace them. Your Sombra will maybe play under, and then what you'll do is your Tracer will push cart. So now what will end up happening is your Tracer will keep pushing this cart, and if they try and, oops, I get that back. Here, Blizzard World. I'm not gonna draw the full thing out, but there's 2 people over here, your backline. The cart is, let's say, over here, and your Tracer essentially is pushing it. And their backline is up here, or their team's over here. So now what will happen is your Tracer will push the cart, and if they don't have any flankers to match your Tracer will be able to constantly push this cart without getting pressured at all. Why? Because you've got packs, you've got orb, cart heals, Tracer's mobile, it'll be good. Plus, you have Sigma over here, your Sigma can also help the Tracer too. That's not the best color, let's use this color. Sigma. Sig, Brig, Zen. and then your ball is looking to displace them. And so while this is happening, or the cart's maybe moving, your ball is going to look to maybe boop them off. And if he does boop someone off, then there might be a Sombra right here waiting to hack that person, plus that person is going to get discorded, plus the Sigma can follow up, and they can get blown up. So that's the whole purpose of like displacing them in open space. Or maybe they make a mistake saying, hey, we need to go contest the cart. So someone drops to go contest the cart, then you can look to pressure them too with your Zen and get value. And if you don't have a Sombra, you can still do the same thing with Ashe. It's just or Hanzo. But your Ashe or Hanzo would essentially take another angle and either maybe to pressure like sort of with you, like who your ball's going on, or maybe they could just soft pressure for an off angle and try and get picks. So that's like sort of the concept of forcing point. The next thing I really want to talk about is sort of the concept of punishing tanks. This is another sort of playstyle that a lot of people do, especially with Tracer Sombra, but you can still again do this with Echo or even Ashe or Cass. What you'll do essentially is enemy team might be rotating, or then and like they might look to hit. Well, let's just say they're not rotating. Let's say like their backline's like over here. So let's just say backline. Their backline's here, and their ball tracer's looking to, you know, come in from some direction. Let's say there. Your backline's over here, and your front line's looking to hit their backline. So your ball plus tracer. Now, when this happens, right, your ball plus tracer, when they're playing like this, they're not trying to actually kill the backline. And in general, I'm not going to get too much into it, but like if you do kill the backline as a ball tracer, especially if it's like a 2v3, that's like an added bonus. You don't necessarily need to. You're just trying to distract them so that your team can get value. In other ways. And in this way, the other way is essentially your Sombra may be chilling over here and looking for the ball to come in, or the Diva. And let's say the Diva would maybe be like, let's say in front here, so maybe like over here, maybe the ball is coming in here. And when this happens, right, your Sombra will then look for a hack on ball or Diva, and then your backline will then look to punish one of them. So let's say the Sombra hacks the Diva, then your Zen will essentially look to discord the Diva and look to blow up the Diva, and then your team will get inherent value that way. Ball Tracer will then look to cycle out and then push back in. So this is sort of like playing more to punish the tanks, right? Obviously, you can still play to dive the backline. You can have your Sombra get ready to dive the backline. That's another play style, but that's something that a lot of people know of, so I don't really want to go into it. Another option is playing a pinch, and that's sort of something that happens sort of over here, if you think about it. Is sort of maybe like the enemy team is holding this high ground, and your ball looks to boop them, and then they boop them down, and then your backline can sort of look to push into them. That's one example. Another sort of example that might happen is something over here. If you might often see a lot of people holding this high ground here, and your backline sort of chilling, holding over here, then what can happen is your ball can look to sort of go behind them, boop them into your backline, and then your backlines can sort of force a brawl. And this is again really useful because the enemy team's just like sort of like out of position. You might like boop like a Brig Zen in, and Brig Zen's really like squishy and can get easily blown up. Obviously, if you boop Diva in, that's not the biggest thing because Diva will just fly away. But if once you start booping those squishies in, you can get a lot of value. And the other example I sort of want to talk about is essentially playing slow and, you know, playing for angles. And obviously these different like play styles is not just like you to play into, you know, mirror comp like ball tracer. Like you saw the example of forcing point over here, whoops, over here, right? That's sort of versus double shield, but that you can also do that versus ball comp as well. So a lot of these play styles are applicable versus different compositions. It's sort of understanding when it's useful and when it's not. But for instance, another playstyle, right, is sort of just playing slow and playing angles and like ping-ponging point. So let's say for the enemy team like forces brawl and they go point, right, and they're not actually trying to chase you because they need a cap. And then in this situation, maybe you just ping-pong point. You send Tracer to point first, and then while it's happening, maybe you have an Ashe up here. You have like a Sigma over here. You've got, you know, your Brig, Zen, you know, maybe your Brig Zen actually probably take a different angle, so maybe they're like over here actually. Brig Zen. So you got something like this, and then your ball and Tracer are sort of just going in one after the time. Tracer goes first, then Tracer goes and cycles out, and then maybe ball comes in from over here and then cycles out, and they're going in one at a time and sort of just constantly ping-ponging. And while it happens, you know, your backline and your DPS are just taking hard angles, and they're going to keep going wide and wide, essentially sort of surround and what I like to call web the enemy to the point where maybe they get something over here, and over here. And this concept's actually something by Zenith, who is ex-coach at San Francisco Shock, came up with when I worked with him on Third Impact, came up with called webbing, where essentially you sort of get around, you sort of make a web with all angles, and you sort of put the enemy team inside. And because you have so many angles, the enemy team isn't really able to deal with that many angles of aggression, and you get value. Okay, so next thing I want to talk about is essentially the concept of, so this is, we did the different play styles. Now we're going to go into how to peel for your backline. So I think this is something really interesting because a lot of ball players don't fully understand this. So let's say you have a backline right over here, your backline's here, and the enemy backline is over here. Now, one of the biggest things I see is the enemy team will look to, like, let's say hit your backline. So these guys go and they hit their ball plus Tracer, and then your backline will be like, okay, or your front line will be like, okay, what do we do, right? As ball tracer, do we look to, go peel? How do we peel our backline? And I'll see them like go back and like, hit the enemy ball tracer. And that's not right, right? What you should be doing is as soon as you see your backline get hit, go hit their backline. Why? Because first of all, if you go hit your backline, their backline is still free to do damage to your backline, and you're not actually splitting any focus. But if you now go look to hit their backline, then what ends up happening is you as 2 people maybe take 3 people, or maybe even 4 people, depending on how many people are there, and take pressure. So then now your backline, which is maybe again 3 or 4, whatever, can deal with their 2 and get value. And because you maybe went second, right, that gives you your backline more time to essentially like get value and kill maybe their ball tracer or live. Or once they force their ball tracer out, your backline to live and maybe try and do a rotation or try and get some more value. So you are essentially looking to peel your backline by hitting their backline. What's opening there? There we go. So that's one way to approach it. And another way of also thinking about this is if like with Winston, when you're playing Winston, sometimes when you're primal, you'll jump into the enemy backline and you'll start like, primaling and splitting them up. You're essentially taking maybe like a 1v3, right? That's a lot better than, jumping in if the enemy Winston jumps in your backline, and you're trying to peel them. No, you don't do that. You jump in the enemy's backline and have 3 people on you, and that makes your team's life so much easier because they can take a 5v whatever else is left and they can probably win that. Biggest thing, right, is when your Winston jumps in with Primal and goes and takes a 1v3, as a Winston, you need to live. Same thing here, right? When Ball Tracer, when you hit this enemy team's backline, you need to live. That's your priority, is to distract them, but live. If you die, that is feeding, and you're giving them a massive, massive, massive advantage. Okay. So then the last thing I want to talk about, and this is something that I think a lot of people struggle with and they don't really understand, is when should a backline brawl? So let's use a map for this. We can sort of use this one. So first thing to understand with this, right, is there's a few things that I think everyone needs to understand. Is what's your general positioning for backline? Well, the first thing is you should always have a corner. Second thing is you should always have good LOS. Third thing is you should always have distance from angles, which I'll explain in a second. Distance from angles. Fourth thing is you should always, always, always understand if you need to be on high ground or not. Verticality or not. And a very simple way of thinking about this is, do they have some type of hit scan or one tap? If they have a one tap hero, right, you should play low ground. Unless you have like a shield. Or it's mid fight. Mid fight you can probably go do stuff. Or because mid fight maybe your ball slams their one tap hero, then you can look to be more aggressive. But this is a general sort of understanding. Oh, the last one I also forgot is rotation options. Why? Because you want to be able to rotate. If the enemy team anti-LOS is your damage is Zen, you want to be able to rotate to get actual damage in. So an example of this is, let's say, playing right over here. Why? Because here you've got a corner, as you can sort of see right over here. You have good LOS, right? You also have what's called distance from angles, which is essentially you can see the enemy team before they actually hit you, right? And here you may not get it the best, but it's still decent. And the reason for this is that when a ball tries to slam on you or a tracer tries to go on you, if you can see them before they actually go on you, you can shoot them and force them out. Same thing with ball. You discord a ball really early, start shooting him, remove his armor, then the ball won't be able to do anything. This helps Braid because Braid can flail or bash flankers away, like flail, tracer, force recall, flail, sombra, force translocator, Zen, you can discord ball, or Braid, you can get ready to bash a ball. So that's what the power of distance from angles is. Then the other thing, right, is the rotation option. So if you look over here, you're able to rotate over here and get another angle. You're looking to rotate over here and get another angle. And then from this spot, you can keep rotating. So there's a lot of rotation options. And obviously, yes, you can go forward and brawl. So the first thing to understand is like, this is like a really, what I call like a power position, because you're essentially able to get a lot of value. Whoops, let's get that back. Boosts on. Now, the question now is, when do we look to walk? When do we look to walk and force a brawl? When do we look to, like, essentially take another angle? So first thing, when you're looking to sort of understand when to take angles, right, you need to understand first, where is the ball? If the ball is like somewhere in Narnia all the way over here, and the distance you have to like rotate to isn't that long, like let's say it's just like right over here, that's not really a long distance, so and you can do that, that's fine. Another way of also thinking about this too is if the ball hits you, and you get the ball to 1 HP and the ball then has to cycle out and he's 1 HP, the ball's not going to hurt you anymore. Hence, you can also rotate and take another angle. Because he's 1 HP, you're going to be okay. If a tracer hits you and the ball's like 1 HP, you've got a break, you hopefully have a diva, right? You'll be fine. Like, it's when you've got a ball, tracer, diva, and you've got a lot more flankers on you, that's when there's going to be an issue. And the last thing, right, is, so it's ball, I'll put it over here, ball, low HP, ball, other side of map, or maybe like your ball tracer's mirroring them, let's say, or pressuring them. And the last one is like ball just hit. This is like a little risky though, because the ball could come back and hit fast, but depending on how much damage you took, they may not. So in these 3 situations, right, these are easy situations where you can definitely look to rotate and take another angle, which is really helpful for your Zen, because if you are shooting from this angle, what could happen is the enemy team could be like, okay, they're shooting from here, we're going to anti-LOS, and they're going to play like right over here. And that's really annoying. So to fix this, you'd be like, well, because they're doing that, I'm going to now rotate over here and then start shooting here and then catch these guys off guard. So as well as it also just gives your Zen another angle that they can look to fire to work on, as well as your break, and maybe look to get another angle to hit Inspire, and it helps your diva as well, or your Sigma, because then they can get another angle as well. Okay. So the other thing, right, is now understanding when to walk forward. This is really important too. So when you want to walk forward is normally not in these situations, but when the ball is dead. If the ball is dead, you don't have to be scared because the enemy team has low flankers, so you can just walk and force a brawl. Other thing is when you've got support ultimates. So I'll say ball dead. When you have support ults like rally, trance, then if the ball tracer does hit you, you're not as scared. Obviously, you don't really want to use them that early, but sometimes you might just want to commit and go really aggro, so that's fine. Another example is when you're pinching, so we sort of talked about here, right? If the enemy team like gets booped in here, you might just pinch and just go aggro into them, because you might just want to risk it a little bit and be aggressive and try and get a kill, and if they kill you, then you might go for those trades. Or the last one is maybe you've got point control and you're holding really close. Let's say like you want to hold right over here and your ball is planning on like hitting right over here, so you want to be able to push right into them. So maybe you got point control. And the other thing to think about, right, is when your ball's dead, right, or you have support ultimates, or you know, you have point control, you can still rotate too. You don't have to necessarily force brawls. And in some situations, maybe you're playing into a brawl comp, or maybe you're playing into a composition that's has better brawl ultimates, or maybe your composition that's more spammy, right? In those situations, they're a better brawl or you're a better spam comp, you might want to prefer taking angles over forcing a brawl. You might want to prefer actually, going wide and like constantly applying pressure and like keep going wide and just keep pressuring them and sort of forming that web that I mentioned and sort of surrounding them and then getting value that way. And obviously if you're up 2 or 3 after you've sort of like formed this web and you spam them, then obviously, yes, you're going to push in and like try and be more aggressive. But you don't have to do that right away. Hopefully this made sense. And if you had any questions, feel free to reach out to me on Discord, and I'll be happy to answer. And if you did watch the whole video, I really appreciate it. It means a lot to me. And thank you so much.